An unfiltered letter to the city of Sanford, Florida. Dear Sanford, I'm speaking to you today because I care. In 2016, I made a visit to Rest Lawn Cemetery in Sanford, Florida. Even though I was still only in the first year of my grave conservationist journey, I had been in it long enough to know what to expect when visiting an African American cemetery in the South. In short, I was braced for disappointment. And the fact that that is a mindset that needs to be had in the first place is a thing in and of itself, but we're gonna stay on target. I was pleasantly surprised by what I saw. The cemetery was well maintained and cared for. No signs of vandalism, despite how easily accessible and visible the cemetery is, which is a rare thing nowadays. Many cemeteries have taken to locking and gating themselves up in order to avoid vandalism, especially the minority ones. It really gave me the sense that the town had put in the work to protect and preserve this piece of their African American community. Again, I was pleased. I then, as I'm sure many people do, noticed the large cemetery across the street. As I previously mentioned, I might not have been in this game very long, but I'd been in long enough to know that actually, more than likely, what I was looking at was not one very large cemetery, but rather a collection of cemeteries right next to each other. And I was right, because I'm good like that. So I made my way through the winding trails of Sanford's Municipal Cemetery Complex, taking in the grounds of Evergreen, All Souls, and Lakeview, admiring the beauty of the headstones and the dedication it must take to maintain a space this large. And then I saw it. At first, I thought I had to be wrong. Everything I had seen had been so beautifully maintained. Even the more obviously historical and defunct parts of the collection of cemeteries. So I had to be wrong, right? There weren't actually graves being taken over by untamed weeds and uncut grass, right? But there was. And there was even a big old sign right there to really hammer that reality in. Page Jackson Cemetery. I was baffled. How was this happening? There was a giant, meticulously maintained network of cemeteries not 10 feet away. So why was this one so badly neglected? It got even worse the further I drove down the dirt road. Graves going further and further back into what was then encroaching woods, temporary grave markers. The only thing some of those souls have to identify them, falling, rusting, decaying. I just could not fucking understand. Especially once I broke through the trees and came across another cemetery at the end of the road. Much smaller and less elaborate, but still completely maintained. So whatever was happening with Page Jackson Cemetery, it was obviously deliberate. It was no accident that the maintenance people were working right up to the edge of this cemetery, skipping over it, and then picking up work again in the cemetery at the end of the road. So then the question became, why? I pulled over and immediately started trying to figure it out. It didn't take me long. Just a couple short minutes of Google investigating will reveal that Page Jackson Cemetery is a historic African American cemetery. The cemetery is estimated to date back to the 1830s and was Sanford's first black cemetery. The land was donated by celery farmer, Mr. Page Jackson, who wanted to give people who could not afford burials a place to lay their loved ones to rest. The cemetery is the final resting place to former slaves and prominent figures alike. Zora Neale Hurston, the author of the literary classic Their Eyes Were Watching God, had a family plot in Page Jackson, and her mother and brother are buried there. Another prominent figure is boxing legend Drew Bundini Brown, cornerman to Muhammad Ali and the originator of his famous quote, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." So, a neglected African-American cemetery in a historically white and conservative area. Tale as old as time, right? Well, not really, because remember Reslon, the African-American cemetery right across the street that is being taken care of? And the cemetery directly behind Paige Jackson that's being taken care of? Its name is Shiloh Cemetery, and it's also an African-American cemetery. So, what the hell was up? I really needed to figure it out, but there was one thing I knew for sure already. You were really dropping the ball here, Sanford. If the cemetery was privately owned, you should have been contacting code enforcement to ensure that the owner was taking better care of the property than this. And if you owned it, then you were just blatantly not doing your fucking job. Either way, you were officially on my shit list, Sanford. And so here we are, 2025, 9 years later. And guess what? Absolutely fucking nothing has changed. In fact, things down at Paige Jackson have only gotten worse. So much worse that I postponed making this letter for 6 months, just so I could go back down there and get updated footage. Because the photos I took back in 2016 and 2021, they don't accurately reflect the neglect anymore. The graves have almost completely disappeared. The cemetery itself has almost completely been wiped off the map. And that is absolute bullshit. So, what the fuck is your problem, Sanford? Why are you so dedicated to failing this cemetery? Well, as I found out, it all boils down to property lines and land ownership. You see, you do own Paige Jackson Cemetery, Sanford, at least the first 9 acres of it. This portion of the cemetery has actually received a restoration project and is currently being maintained. But the other 6 acres? That part of the cemetery is actually within unincorporated Seminole County property lines and has been owned by local churches, fraternal organizations, and whatnot over the years. But now the exact ownership of these acres is unclear, which some say has resulted in the current state of the cemetery. No owner, no one to hold accountable for taking care of it, right? Well, I don't agree with that at all. I don't attribute the current state of Paige Jackson Cemetery to a lack of a clear owner, and I don't believe that there's no one we can hold accountable. I blame you for the current state of that cemetery, Sanford, and you should be held accountable for it. You see, in our modern civilized society, we have this concept called community. The South especially prides itself on this concept and how well we look after our own. Except, that's not really what's happening here, is it, Sanford? You've abandoned your own. And just to be clear, those people laid to rest in Paige Jackson Cemetery are your people, members of your community, your citizens. And you've decided to let those people and the place that they trusted to lay their earthly remains to rest, rot, and decay. You'd rather do that than step in and do what is needed to preserve and honor their memory. Oh, but the property line, the ownership, what do we do about that? Well, you could look at the laws to start. In section 497.284, Florida statutes, it states that A county or municipality which has within its jurisdiction an abandoned cemetery or a cemetery that has not been reasonably maintained for a period in excess of 6 months, upon notice to the division, is permitted to take such actions as is necessary and appropriate to provide for maintenance and security of the cemetery. And yes, that includes taking ownership of the cemetery. And we can see this happening in real time in 2 of your fellow Central Florida cities, Sanford. The city of Ocoee began the process to acquire a privately owned yet abandoned piece of property known as hallowed ground. This acre of land is believed to be a site of serious importance to the city's 1920s massacre and their African American history. So, in an effort to protect it from development and neglect, they've decided to take ownership of it. And on top of the price of acquiring it, they also plan on investing money into building memorials, monuments, benches, gazebos, and whatnot in an effort to turn the space into a true place of honoring and remembrance, which is exactly what the city of Groveland did for the Oak Tree Union Colored Cemetery of Taylorville. Oak Tree sat abandoned and neglected for 70 years. After the infamous Groveland 4 case, in which 4 African American men were falsely charged and persecuted for the rape of a white woman, the local KKK vandalized the cemetery and were said to stake out the cemetery at night. This naturally caused the family members and community to be afraid to go near it, and thus the abandonment began. But in 2022, Groveland reached out to the state of Florida and received a $500,000 grant to restore the cemetery. For 4 months, 8 hours every Friday, hundreds of volunteers removed 35 truckloads of trees, weeds, and refuse. Features of the new memorial site include an informational kiosk, a pavilion with markers listing the known souls buried there, an area paying homage to the interred veterans, and an area to honor the children interred there. So, what does Ocoee and Groveland have that you don't, Sanford? A strong sense of community, the backbone to stand up when things need to get done? Or maybe they just understand the power of optics better than you do. They understand that when your city is the site of tragic hate crimes against African Americans, it's not exactly the best look to let your historically African American sites go so neglected that they're practically an eyesore. But surely, as the city where the modern day lynching of Trayvon Martin took place, you understand that, right? The modern day lynching that your police department has been accused nationwide of massively mishandling so badly, in fact, that it resulted in the firing of your police chief? No. Surely you understand that that would be an absolutely terrible look for you and wouldn't allow yourself to end up there. Wouldn't give your detractors, who are already convinced you're a covert sundown town, more ammunition to fire against you. Right? And I can hear the pitiful attempts of arguments already. Why are you taking this that far? You don't need to take it to this place. It's not that big a deal. Oh, really? Why don't you say that to the African American community in Jacksonville who had loved ones and ancestors buried in Yukon Cemetery? You know, the final resting place for the slaves and former slaves of the Mulberry Grove plantation. The cemetery that, when the military came in and decided to build the Naval Air Station on that land that was deeded by the plantation owner to his former slaves after the war, the African American community in the area was forced to disband, and the cemetery fell into neglect and decay, to the point that local children were going into the woods that had overtaken the cemetery and were coming back wielding arm bones and skulls. go ahead and look them in the eye and say, this isn't that big a deal. By the way, for no reason, where are your grandparents buried? Just asking. Cemeteries fall apart and disappear all the time. They're old. It's just what happens. Firstly, blatantly false. Toledo Cemetery of St. Augustine, established 1777. It's still there. Granary Burying Ground of Boston, established 1660. It's still there. Miles Standish Burial Ground of Duxbury, established 1638, the oldest cemetery in the country. It's still there. It's not something that just happens. It's something we let happen. And not just let happen, but let happen to particular cemeteries. St. Augustine is able to maintain and preserve Toledo, but not Pinehurst and San Sebastian, the state's oldest African-American cemeteries? Interesting. And Massachusetts can maintain and preserve Granary and Standish, but not Prince Hall Mystic Cemetery? The burial ground for the first African-American Masonic group in the United States? Huh. Or hell, preserve and maintain even just the black section of Copp's Hill Burial Ground. The white section of it is beautifully taken care of. I know, I've been there. But the black section, it's all but disappeared. Phyllis Wheatley, the first African-American woman to publish a novel, is buried somewhere in Copp's Hill, but we have no idea where. There's only a handful of headstones still standing in the African-American section, and hers isn't one of them. But oh yeah, nothing questionable about that at all. Secondly, the kids local to Yukon Cemetery were wielding arm bones and skulls. I don't really think I should have to say more than that. But I will. Thirdly, did you know that letting these cemeteries fall into decay and losing track of them can actually cause massive problems for us, the living? Oh yeah, let me explain. Zion Cemetery was Tampa's first African-American cemetery. Oh, another black cemetery. But just a coincidence, right? Anyway, over the course of time, the cemetery faded out of existence. The city claimed that the cemetery had been moved in order to build more whites-only developments, but the locals to the area don't remember this mass reburial happening. Hell, they don't even remember where the cemetery was originally. Well, guess what? The people living in Robles Park housing complex found out real quick because they were on top of it. Yep, shocker, shocker. A city in the South lied about taking care of their segregated African-American cemetery, didn't do that at all. And now, in the present day, hundreds of people have been living on top of at least 400 bodies for at least 100 years. No wonder the residents have said they felt as though there was a presence there and that the building was haunted. So now all the folks in those apartments get to find a new place to live. Because the city is working on correcting their disgusting behavior and turning the space into a memorial. Huh, interesting how other Florida cities keep finding ways to make that happen. And also, the residents don't want to live on top of hundreds of dead people. So yeah, it kind of turns into a big fucking problem when we don't stay on top of these cemeteries. But what about money? It takes money to take care of these cemeteries. Who's gonna pay for it? City budgets don't have all the money in the world. Yeah, I can definitely see how that's an issue. If only there were some kinds of bills or laws that help deal with that problem. Oh, right. There fucking are. House Bill 37 was passed in 2021, which established the Historic Cemeteries Program and ensures that the program provides grants, aka money, to, quote, research institutions, colleges and universities, and qualified nonprofit organizations for the purpose of conducting genealogical and historical research necessary to identify and contact the relatives and descendants of persons buried in abandoned African American cemeteries, end quote. And on top of that, provide grants for, quote, local governments and qualified nonprofit organizations for the purposes of repairing, restoring, and maintaining abandoned African American cemeteries. Then we have House Bill 49, passed unanimously in 2023. This bill establishes protections for abandoned and historic cemeteries and creates initiatives that, quote, support and facilitate education about and the maintenance of abandoned and historic cemeteries. Additionally, the law includes a $1 million appropriation for conducting research on abandoned cemeteries and providing grants for the repair, restoration, or maintenance of African American cemeteries, unquote. There is money specifically allocated to take care of these cemeteries. So why is Drew Bundini Brown's grave still being taken over by the wilds of nature, Sanford? All while growing up in the neighboring city of Orlando, I heard that we were different from everywhere else that surrounded us, that we were an island of diversity, acceptance, progress, and unity in a vast sea of hatred and bigotry. Sanford was always listed as being part of that sea, but your people will disagree. They will point to things like the Goldsboro West Side Historical Association and all of the work they've done to restore, amplify, and honor the African American history of your city. They'll point to the large African American population that calls you home and how hard they showed up and canvassed and voted for Kamala Harris during our last election. They'll point to these things as proof that those stories of you from my childhood were wrong. They'll ask that I not let what happened to Trayvon Martin stain their city in my mind forever. But that's one hell of an ask, especially when I add what I've been watching happen to Paige Jackson's cemetery for years into the mix. I don't feel the urge to change my mind when I see that only the 9 acres of the cemetery you own are being restored, and by volunteers on their own time and dime at that. And I don't blame them for being hesitant to work on the acres that you don't own, because where the hell would they even start? These are moms dedicating their time when they're not busy working or raising their kids. High school honor society students on their weekends when they're not doing homework or studying. They don't have the access to or the money for the industrial level equipment that would be necessary to even begin restoring that part of the cemetery. But you do, and you are actively choosing not to. When discussing the restoration project at Oak Tree, Groveland Fire Chief and leader of the project, Kevin Carroll, said, quote, "This project has unified so many people in the community. Everyone leaves their political affiliations at the door. The main purpose is to restore dignity, respect, and honor to the civilians and World War I veterans who were forgotten about in the cemetery. A person's skin color should never play a part in stopping someone from doing the right thing. It shouldn't play a part in anything. It's kinda easy. Do what's right. Treat people like you want to be treated," end quote. When asked about his involvement in the project, Dio Persad, city HR manager and assistant to Carroll, said this, quote, "It's my role as a civil servant. It's the right thing to do for the community. Our lives are all intertwined. It's not just fixing things up and making them right. It's about taking care of the people in the community, the people who served and sacrificed themselves on a higher level. They gave everything. As a city employee, you can't help but ask yourself, if you were in the shoes of the descendants, why haven't they done better by us? I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do," end quote. The right thing to do. It's as simple as that, Sanford. It's the right thing to do, and you're not doing it. Despite the outcry from your community and grave conservationists, Despite the horrifying evidence of what happens when we allow these cemeteries to decay like this, despite the bad optics considering your recent and not so recent history regarding racial issues, and despite the access to resources and funds that house builds provide for just such cases. So what the fuck else am I supposed to think other than you just don't fucking care? Back in 2020, the director of the Goldsboro West Side Historical Association, Francis Oliver, said, quote, "Hopefully we can get some money on a national level, but that graveyard is going to get restored," end quote. With all due respect to him, and truly I mean that, the money is there. So my question, the question I've been asking for 9 years now is, fucking when? When is that cemetery going to get restored? We're all waiting for your answer, Sanford. Sincerely, someone who does fucking care. Now, Sanford, I know it seems like I just spent many minutes reading you to filth, and don't get it twisted, I did. But as I said in my sign-off, it's because I care. Like, a lot. Your community deserves better, and I know you can do better. So like any good teacher would, I am simply pushing you to be the best that I know you can be. I just don't have to keep the kid gloves on with you like I do with the actual kids. So if you're finally ready to start making this right, there are some names you should know and reach out to. Kevin Carroll, Fire Chief of Groveland and Project Manager of Oak Tree Restoration Project. Nigel Rudolph, Public Archaeology Coordinator at the Central Regional Center of Florida Public Archaeology Network. Antoinette Jackson, Chair of Anthropology at the University of South Florida and the founder of the Black Cemeteries Network. And lastly, me, the girl whose heart has been breaking over Page Jackson Cemetery for the last 9 years. We can be friends, Sanford. You just have to get your shit together first. So this little letter has been years in the making at this point. Page Jackson Cemetery has just weighed so heavily on my mind ever since that first day back in 2016 and just refuses to let go, even after moving halfway across the country. So I knew there was no way I was going to get out of doing something for it. The something has taken a lot of different shapes over the years, from ranting to friends and family, to endless social media posts, so much research on African American cemeteries in the South, and even prioritizing African American cemeteries when going on my cemetery exploring adventures. And now we have this letter. I know it may not be the greatest thing to ever grace the internet. I've never claimed to be an influencer, let alone a good one, but please just understand that every tear I have ever shed over this place, every hour of sleep I have lost over it, and every bit of what's left of my shriveled soul has been put into this. There are some thanks I should probably dole out. Firstly, to my friends and family who have had to listen to me rage against this machine for the last 9 years. Secondly, the city of Groveland. Just endlessly thank you for what you did for Oak Tree. You very, very powerfully demonstrated to everyone that this is possible and that it is important, and that really just gives grave conservationists like me hope that all this that we're doing is not for nothing. My biggest thanks goes to my fellow grave conservationists out there. It is a true honor and privilege to witness the work that you do. And you amaze and astound me every single day. And I carry all of the wisdom that you have given me over the years into every graveyard I visit. And lastly, thank you to everyone watching this right now. Whether it just popped up on your radar somehow, or you've been hearing me talk about making this thing for the last 6 months, thank you for your time and your patience.